Minasan konnichiwa. So have you been learning Japanese, been hitting the books, maybe getting good scores on your tests, but yet you still find yourself asking the question, why is actual conversation so hard? Being good on paper can actually be very much different from applying what you learn in an actual conversation. The best way to get better at speaking is simple. You just actually need to speak. Try to speak Japanese as much as you can, as often as you can. And this can be pretty difficult if in your area not a lot of people speak Japanese. Like me, I live in the Philippines, not a lot of people here speak Japanese. In a situation where you don't have people to practice with on a daily basis, a little creativity can go a long way. In this video, I want to share with you a few tips on what to consider when you're trying or starting to practice speaking Japanese. And I'm also going to throw in a bunch of practice methods that I've employed in my own practice that I think might be helpful to you as well. Once again, disclaimer, I am not a professional tutor. I am just a student myself, and I'm just sharing some of the things that I've learned to use that I hope you guys will find useful as well. So I hope you guys find this helpful. So dewa, hajimemashou. So tip number 1, first and foremost, when you start applying conversational practice in your practice routine, it's very important to not get way too ahead of yourself. Start simple. You don't need to answer life's biggest questions just yet. Just start with what children would talk about, such as your favorite color, your favorite food, your favorite movie, or what do you do when you're happy? And then you can work your way from there as you progress, as you learn more vocabulary and grammar patterns. Ne, 好きな色は? Ah, 黒いだよ。かっこいいじゃないの? 確かにね。僕も黒い好きだよ. Second tip is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're gonna mess up a lot of the grammar, and you're gonna need to figure out the usage a little bit before you get it perfect. But just keep practicing and keep at it. Making mistakes is part of the learning process. Just make sure that you learn from your mistakes and learn to correct them while you're practicing, so that you can grow from them and learn from your mistakes. じゃあ食べよう。納豆食べくないから。は？ああ、食べないよね。言いたかったことね。あ、そう。すみません。いや、大丈夫よ。Apply what you learn in class or in your studies. And, whenever you learn a new grammar pattern, maybe you learn a new sentence pattern, maybe even a new word, try to apply it in your conversation practice as much as you can. So try to pick topics or subjects that will allow you to use these new lessons that you learned, because as you know, the more that you use these lessons, the more that you use what you learn and apply them, the sooner and faster you're going to gain mastery over them, and it'll become more natural to you as you apply it in conversation practice. Okay, so now we move on to the actual methods that you can employ in your daily practice or in your regular conversation practice to maybe help you out improve your actual speaking. So the first one would be to record yourself. So hearing yourself saying the words and, going through the sentences can actually help you out, and it does something to help you remember and really get familiar with how to use these structures, these grammar patterns, and these words. The simplest way and the easiest way to do this would be to simply record yourself reading out conversation scripts from your textbook. A lot of textbooks have these that is designed to be read with a partner, but if you don't have a partner, you can very much do this yourself and it'll still help you out. So right now I'm gonna go ahead and read from my textbook, which is Genki. I use Genki textbooks to study Japanese, and I'm gonna read out one of the conversation examples from that book. これはソラさんの家族の写真ですか？ええ。ソラさんはどれですか？これです。高校の時はメガネをかけていました。かわいいですね。これは父です。ニューヨークの会社で働いています。背が高くてかっこいいですね。これはお姉さんですか？姉は結婚しています。今、ソウルに住んでいます。子供が一人います。3歳です。ああ、そうですか。猫がいますよね。ちょっと太っていますね。よく食べますから。So yes, you can do that. You can go ahead and read through the conversations in your textbook, and if you find a partner in the future, you can also go through these together. They will help you out a lot. It helps you to figure out how conversations normally flow and help you get started in just, having a basic idea of how conversations would go in real life. Number two would be to make videos like I do, like this video that I'm doing right now. And last week I did a video where I talk about my study journey, my Japanese study journey. And I'll leave it in the description below so you guys can check that out after this video too. So talking to a camera is a lot like talking to a person or a group of people, and it forces you to create sentences and think in Japanese too. So videos like the one that I did specifically for the purpose of conversation practice or speaking practice can help you out if you don't have a partner. And then you can watch these videos after you record them and go through it so you can take notes as to what you did good and what you did, not as good at, and points for improvement that you might need to work on. So it'll help you review your pronunciation, your grammar, and if you're using the correct sentence patterns for the context of what you're saying. It'll help you really to dissect how you would converse as if you were conversing with an actual person. So doing a video of just you talking to a camera literally about anything. You can talk about your day, you can talk about your week, you can talk about your favorite food, anything at all can help you out a lot as you practice Japanese. And of course, if you're not comfortable putting your video out on YouTube, you don't have to. You can just keep these videos to yourself so that you can watch them whenever you need to. Okay, so the third method that you can try to help improve your conversation practices and conversational skills is to listen to Japanese learning podcasts. This is a podcast that my sensei recommended to me. It's called Nihongo con Teppei. It's on Spotify. I don't know if it's on any other platforms, but I listened to it on Spotify. And it's a podcast catered towards beginner learners, specifically beginner learners. So the podcast goes like, the host would talk about random topics per episode. Like each episode is devoted to a topic, and then he would talk about that, and then he would ask you questions about said topic that you can then answer from wherever you're listening from. So it's nice to practice answering questions, and you also pick up some new words and vocabulary from it. It's passive learning, if you will. I like to use it as passive learning. I mainly listen to this podcast when I'm going through my daily tasks. I have it playing in the background, and then Teppei would ask me questions, and then I would answer them while I'm, for example, making coffee or cooking or whatsoever. It's almost like having a friend around you who would randomly ask you questions throughout the day, and then you would have to answer them. And it's really helpful, and it's also listening practice as well. So you get familiar with how the language sounds, and it also helps out with your conversation skills. There's also a lot of repetition in this podcast, so he would ask these questions over and over, and as we know, repetition builds mastery, and it'll help you retain those structures more, those words. So I will leave the link to the podcast in the description so you guys can check it out after this video too. Okay, number 4, talk to yourself. Nobody's gonna judge you for it, and if you can't find a partner to practice with yet, it's perfectly fine to practice with yourself, and it'll help you too. So talking to yourself, you know how we have these internal monologues sometimes where we would think, for example, I wonder if I should eat. So you could translate thoughts like that into Japanese. Tabeta hoga ii kana? That'll help you to force yourself to think in Japanese. Because if you want to get fluent and want to get good at Japanese, or really get good at any language, you need to think in that language. So this is one of those methods that'll help you, I think, in doing so. Yeah, sometimes I just talk to myself while I'm working, for example, and you can do that too, and it looks kind of like this. 疲れたな。仕事が本当に難しいよね。そうだよね。もうすぐ終わったの？終わった？まだ始めないんだよ。え、マジ？やべえ。Number 5, practice with a partner. Eventually, you're gonna have to find somebody to practice with, and you should definitely put this as one of your goals, to find somebody to practice with. And there are several options for you to do that. I talk about that in the tips video that I did last time on how to get started, or like things to consider when getting started in learning Japanese. So find a partner, and once you do find a partner, practice with your partner regularly. And I know that it can be tempting to be spontaneous when you're practicing with your partner and just talk about anything that comes to your head while you're talking to each other. However, I would strongly advise you to plan out your practice sessions ahead of time. Pick out the topics ahead of time and stick to that topic. That way it'll give you a sense of direction and you get less chances of getting sidetracked while you're practicing. So when you're starting out, it would help you a lot when you're planning out the sessions rather than being spontaneous about it, or like entirely spontaneous about it. Don't worry, eventually you will get to a point where you can do it spontaneously, but at the start, it'll help you get started better and more efficiently when you plan out your sessions ahead of time. So for example, you want to focus on practicing verbs. You would want to pick a subject that is centered around activity, for example. So you can have these subjects, these topics focused on a certain area that you want to practice together for that session. So if you're looking for a place to find a partner, I would recommend joining Nihongo no Classmate Discord server. I'm a part of that, and Crystal, who is a good friend of mine, owns that server and runs that server. There's a lot of wonderful people there to meet, make friends with, and of course, practice with. So I think you might find your practice partner there. So we'd be happy to have you join us and practice. Looking forward to practicing with you. So I will leave the link in the description for you guys to check out. And number 6, I think, is my personal favorite way to practice conversation. It's Persona! Play a video game that has unvoiced lines and then say those lines yourself. So if you're like me, I play these games in Japanese audio but with English subtitles because I don't know enough kanji to be able to play through an entire game in full Japanese. So what I do instead is, so even though if it's in English, but since the voices are unvoiced, like some of the scenes don't have voiced lines, it's just text that you're reading, right? And then your character is picking out dialogue options. I would read those dialogue options in Japanese, in my head. Although sometimes I like to voice act a bit. If you know, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I've always enjoyed kind of making impressions of characters and people ever since I was a kid. So I do that too. And it's super fun. And you also learn a lot in doing this. My favorite game personally is Persona. The Persona series are my favorite. Absolutely love them. And right now I'm playing Persona 3 and I'm employing this method as I'm playing Persona 3. Well, of course I don't do this all the time because rest is also important. But when you're in the mood to do this, it'll definitely help you out get better at speaking.
だよ。
無理しないでね。
まだ諦めないでよ。戦えるぞ。お前は大丈夫？頑張ったな。疲れないの？どのトレーニングやってるんだ？
特別なトレーニングだよ。
やっぱりならなければ俺はお前マジだよ。もう負けたな。
So, in conclusion, learning Japanese does not end in the classroom, and learning from outside the classroom through actual conversation and associating with people who are also learning the language or maybe native speakers of the language is an entirely different experience than you would have in a classroom or when you're studying. And both of them are equally important. They work hand in hand. So as you progress in class, you also progress in actual conversation, actually using the language. And as you progress there, you also progress in class. So they work hand in hand and they're both equally important. They both exist to help you get better at speaking the language. And at the end of the day, the Japanese language is, a language, and languages are meant to be used, to be spoken, and to communicate with other people. So the more you communicate, the more that you make yourself use the language, the better at it, and the faster you will be at progressing in that language. So speak as often as you can, have fun, be creative, and know that a little creativity can go a long way. Enjoy learning. Enjoy the journey. Do you have tips that you use yourself when you're learning Japanese or when you're practicing conversation? If you do, please do share them in the comments. I would love to know, and we can share thoughts on that and, help each other get better. So everybody, if you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, which I hope you did find it helpful, please consider subscribing as it'll help the channel a lot, and leave a thumbs up. I very much appreciate it. So thank you for watching, everybody. Mite korete arigatou gozaimasu. Mata ne.